B-roll is another term for just all the other shots in your video. For us, it's anything aside from the interviews. Now, if you can, you usually want to add B-roll images to help cover up any awkward edits in your interviews, as well as to help illustrate the story. Well-chosen B-roll can make the Frankenstein editing of interviews feel a little more natural, but it can also just take your story to a whole nother level. And by the way, it's called B-roll because back a long time ago, you'd shoot your main footage. In our case, it would be the interviews, and you'd call that the A-roll. Everything else, all the supporting footage, was the B-roll. No one really uses the term A-roll anymore, but B-roll stuck around. So B-roll can be any footage that supports your interviews. It might be video footage that you already have, or you may shoot new video for the B-roll. You can even use stock footage that someone else shoots that you get the rights to use. We'll talk more about that later on. Or it can just be a photo, but for right now, let's talk about shooting your own B-roll. There are a couple of things that you want to think about. The first, it's just getting the shots. What can you film? What are the ideas? Some of the earlier videos I showed you about the music workshops, we added footage of the actual workshop. So while the kids talked about taking a workshop, we saw them taking a workshop, and hopefully that's pretty obvious. But in a story about a children's advocacy group, well, for privacy reasons, we couldn't talk about or show specific kids. So instead, we shot footage of the facility, and specifically from the height of a child by holding the camera at the waist. Well, that gave us some footage to add that it represented the child without having to show any specific kids. We also purchased some B-roll footage from a stock footage service. There's usually an image that can work for your piece, and a lot of times figuring it out, well, it can just be trial and error. Just put something there and see if that works. Keep an open mind. You'll be surprised how often it really does. When filming your own B-roll, something that can help your footage to be more engaging is adding controlled motion to the image. I had a teacher who always drilled into us the importance of eye candy, which was just the idea of getting motion into the frame. It just makes it look cooler. Here are some examples of things that might normally be still, but they added motion in the camera and even in the things themselves, like these signs from the Lego movie, to make it feel more vibrant, more interesting. Again, eye candy. So rather than filming something by just setting the camera on a tripod, how can you add motion into the image? Having people walk through the shot is a great way to add motion, or even use the people who are walking through to make it feel more natural to move the camera by following their motion. Check out how the motion here in Ratatouille makes the camera move feel totally organic and smooth. Now you don't have to map out that much choreography with your characters and your shots, but hopefully it gives you an idea of how motion in the frame makes the motion in the camera, well, it just makes it feel right. Another reminder here that faces always work. The more eyes we can see is usually going to make a shot more emotional, more effective. Shoot them from the front where we can see their faces instead of from behind. You can also use photos, like I mentioned earlier, if that's what you've got. And there are ways to add motion to still images in the computer, and we'll talk about that when we get to editing, but here are a few simple examples of using computer moves on photos to give them a little more life. And finally, a technical note on B-roll. Always film more than you think you'll need. A phrase you hear sometimes in the edit bay is that no one ever wishes that they had less footage of something. So start the camera rolling a little early and let it roll a bit long when you're getting the B-roll. Maybe take multiple shots of the same thing if you can, so you know that you've got what you need when you sit down to edit. Because again, that's part of the point of B-roll, to add to and cover up the interview. And if the footage isn't long enough to do that, well, rather than solving a problem, sometimes it can just make new ones. But again, what B-roll really does is it just can take your story and make it come alive.